Bitcoin is for enemies. It was announced yesterday. Speaking to a report, or okay, I'm just going to read this because honestly, I laughed a few times and had to read and have this translated to me from Farsi into English by multiple people because I thought I read it wrong. But speaking to reporters at the conclusion of an exhibition of automotive industry in Tehran on Sunday, Fatemi Amin said that comprehensive and detailed law ratified by the administration defines regulations on cryptocurrencies, the supply of fuel and electricity for mining, and the authorization to use cryptocurrencies. Under an agreement between the Ministry of Industry and the Central Bank of Iran, the impacts from abroad can be processed. The imports from abroad can be processed with the use of cryptocurrencies. They never specify anything in particular. I think this is a huge step forward for Bitcoin as a whole. We'll dive into sort of why I think they're hedging themselves and not necessarily naming Bitcoin as itself. But this is now another example of a country out there that is using Bitcoin and the broader cryptocurrency market to navigate and get around the US sanctions. And Russia took a similar stance shortly after the US announced sanctions on them. And Putin said, please feel free to pay us in rubles, pay us in gold, or pay us in Bitcoin. And now you have Iran following a similar path. So I think it's very, very interesting as these countries that the US has said, don't trade with them. Well, guess what? They have what the rest of the world needs. Iran has such an excess amount of oil that the country subsidizes its own electricity for its citizens, which, fun fact, makes Bitcoin mining very, very lucrative in that country. However, Iran actually last year sent out a ban on Bitcoin mining for no reason other than the fact that it was starting to use up too much energy on their energy grids. And there were rolling blackouts that Iran was dealing with all of last summer. So it's interesting that on a global stage, you have a country like Iran and Russia both coming out and saying, we will accept Bitcoin, we will accept cryptocurrencies for trades. And then internally, they are not willing to allow their citizens to have that same freedom. You have Iran passing these bans and restrictions on Bitcoin mining. You have the news out of Russia saying that they are not going to allow citizens to transact goods and services in exchange for Bitcoin, crypto, or NFTs. You have the country of Ukraine openly accepting Bitcoin donations while at the same time telling their citizens, hey, there's only a limit to how much Bitcoin you yourself can have and hold and buy per day. So this is the beginning of something very, very interesting to me. And I open it up to either of you because like I have a very strong bias in this matter. I, however, believe that this is the right step towards Bitcoin being adopted en masse by countries.
Yeah, I mean, Q, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't Iran like number 3 or 4 in Bitcoin mining in the world? I know they've had a little bit of a hiccup with banning it or restricting it, but I believe it's US, China, Kazakhstan, maybe, and then Iran's either 3 or 4 fighting in between there.
It depending on the list you look at, it is right after Kazakhstan, and the main reason issue why is the same reason and issue, quite frankly, that like you don't get the right readings and numbers out of China. A lot of VPNs are being used. A lot of mining sort of pools are hidden and tucked away. Here's a really, really interesting thing that I learned about Bitcoin mining in Iran. So, two places where electricity is free: school systems and churches. So, what did Bitcoin miners go do? They went to the basements of schools and churches and set up Bitcoin mining rigs because the electricity there is free. Love that. Absolutely love that. So it is a very important part of the broader global Bitcoin mining ecosystem. And I urge people who hear this news and then scoff and be like, well, there you go. Like Bitcoin is being used by Russia. Bitcoin's being used by Iran. Like, why would we in the US use Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is for everyone, but we have to really understand the reasons why they're actually being forced to use Bitcoin. And when we realize like, oh, it's because the US is yet again overplaying their hands and trying to sort of play this de facto, like, hey, our rules are the rules you have to play by too. When in reality, like people just need oil, people need gas, people need energy. We are entering winter, and you have two countries in Iran and Russia that have a significant portion of global energy reserves and are now under US sanctions for what? Why is Iran actually under US sanctions? Really ask yourself that. And if you cite Western media sources like I NGMI,